Hi everyone, Matthew DeSantis here with NYRA Bets, and welcome to a special preview video of this weekend's Raven Run and Perryville Stakes taking place at Keeneland on Saturday. It's going to be two fantastic races on a 10-race card down there in Lexington. Always a lot of fun to play Keeneland. Now, before we get into this video where I have a very special guest joining me, make sure to press that like button and subscribe to the new NYRA Bets YouTube channel. We have race previews, full card analyses, handicapping and betting tutorials, as well as loads of videos getting you ready for the 2024 Breeders' Cup. Well, listen, when I think of Keeneland, I think of someone who is synonymous with Keeneland and who one of my colleagues called the king of Keeneland, actually, the other day, and that is Mr. Tom Leach. Tom, thank you so much for agreeing to come on and talk about two really fun stakes races with me.
Happy to help.
And this has been, I think, a really successful meet. It's been wonderful weather down there in Lexington through the first couple of weeks of this meet. Looks like more great weather this weekend. And the meet as a whole has just been a really wonderful time. We've seen some really great winners so far.
Yeah, I've seen some impressive horses that I think East Avenue is one that comes to mind that could be a real player in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. So I think there are some horses that will come out of this race. The Spinster winner's always got to be respected in the distaff, and that was Brad Cox's mare who will be trying to go for two in a row against Torpedo Anna. So that should be a fun race. We got a little bit of rain on Tuesday here in Central Kentucky, and it was the first rain in about 2 weeks. And I thought on Wednesday, the start of the new week of racing, that it was a little more favorable to closers perhaps than it had been. So we'll see if that holds up through the weekend.
Yeah, you were not. It's interesting. I saw a couple of other people comment on that throughout the day, that it seemed like some of the front end speed was stopping maybe a little bit, and that people coming from off the pace were having a lot of success. So definitely something to keep in mind to see how the track plays. Obviously, being up here in New York, we are no stranger to winter weather, rain, and all sorts of things that can have an impact on track conditions and track biases. But let's dive into these two really exciting races, and we'll get things kicked off in the Grade 3 Perryville, going 7 furlongs for your 3-year-old colts on the dirt. And this is a field of 12. And there's really three horses, I think, that stand out as obviously top contenders. And that's your morning line favorite, Book'em Danno, the New Jersey bred, the Grade 1 winner of the Woody Stevens, Knightsbridge, who is been a horse that is loaded with talent, but has just never been able to really stay on the track consistently. And then another horse that's making his return. I know he's cross-entered up here with a race as well. We'll see where he ends up running between Keeneland or Aqueduct, but that's the number 10 Locked. I'm interested, kind of your thoughts on some of those top contenders in this race.
I do picks for the Keeneland website and analysis, and I couldn't make a good case to not take the heavy favorite Book'em Danno in here. 3 triple-digit buyers in his last 3 starts, and nobody else has one. And I saw some notes from Derek Ryan, the trainer, some comments in the Keeneland notes that are very good. And he gave no indication that there was any reason to not like this horse's chances. Sometimes you get to the fall and maybe the main goals have been hit for some of these horses. And if they're not going on to the Breeders' Cup and not prepping for that, maybe you can, catch them. If you're trying to play against Book'em Danno, you could hope that he's maybe over the top. There's no evidence of that. You could hope that, his last buyer was his highest, and the other 3 have been, the other 2 have been very good, that at some point regression will come and maybe this will be the time. So, I mean, you're just, trying to talk yourself into it probably. I think Knightsbridge is interesting because you don't know what the ceiling is. Now, in the same notes column on this race, there was a comment from one of the Godolphin representatives that they said he had a bone bruise, I think, or foot bruise in the spring, and so they had to back off of him. And they are bringing him back with the idea of 7/8 was a good place to start at a Grade 3 stake off those 2 incredibly impressive performances. But the quote was they have nothing in mind beyond this. So it's not like they're necessarily thinking, I don't know, Cigar Mile or something like that.
Right.
But again, horses 2 runaway wins and did it very impressively last fall and in the spring. So you just don't know how good that one might be. And those were, 92 and 96 buyers, I think. Locke,
Yeah.
just on class, won the Claiborne Breeders' Futurity here last fall. And if he runs here just on that class, you'd have to give him a shot. And Pletcher. The horse on the outside's a little intriguing. Epic Ride was third in the Bluegrass. I remember hearing they were really high. Connections were really high on this horse. Ran a good second to Encino before the Bluegrass. Ran about the way you might have expected in the Derby. Hadn't run since then, but I think that's a horse with some talent. Don't know about a win, but maybe at a price underneath. And then Tommy Drury, I think, is a sharp and somewhat overlooked trainer by bettors sometimes. And he's got a horse named Houday, who I think's just a hard knocking horse. And if one or two of the favorites were to not show up, this horse tends to run his race and has some mid 90 buyers that would make him competitive. So certainly for an underneath candidate, and if you're building multi races and you want to try to beat Book'em Danno, then you probably, if you're not going to single Book'em Danno, you probably need to take a few of them anyway, and this would be one to take a look at.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I would say it's funny. You might have actually. It sounds like you almost took a sneak peek at my notes, because of very similar thoughts on this race. Book'em Danno is a horse I've gotten a chance to see several times up here in New York, and is always just so impressive. And you're right, it tends to still be somehow overlooked, I think, because of the smaller connections. Derek Ryan's not, Bill Mott or Todd Pletcher, and the New Jersey bred, and so sometimes you do get the horses like that overlooked. But those last three efforts have just been spectacular, and even the last four, going back to finishing second to Forever Young, who is going to be one of the top 2 or 3 choices in this year's Breeders' Cup Classic, back when they ran in the Saudi Derby. So just an incredibly impressive horse who's gone all over the world now and proved his class. So really, I think a tough horse to get around in this spot. Does have a little bit more off the pace running style. You mentioned the way the track was playing Wednesday. Will obviously be interesting to see how it continues to play Thursday, Friday, and into Saturday as well. And Knightsbridge, listen, this is a horse. I don't blame the Godolphin people for not having a next target, because the horse has never put back-to-back races together. There's been a race and a layoff, a race and a layoff. So I maybe one of the goals is just getting out of this race healthy, so that this horse can go on and do something else later on in his 4-year-old year in 2025. So incredibly talented horse. Like you said, potential could be unlimited, not unlimited, but certainly he might not have even scratched it yet. So obviously, on that alone, you might be able to take a shot. And Locked is interesting. I mean, the fact that this is a horse that had success routing at Keeneland in that Claiborne Breeders' Futurity, and now they're bringing him back at 7/8. Pletcher, very good, 26% over the last 5 years, bringing back horses from 180 to 365-day layoffs in dirt sprints. So, obviously, is a barn that knows how to get these horses ready for this spot. The outside post is a little interesting. And then the 2 value plays that I was going to bring up were the 2 that you mentioned. Epic Ride. That horse, the outside post is interesting. That horse showed a lot of speed on the synthetic, and maybe not quite as much speed on the dirt, but did sit, I think, a nice tracking trip in that Bluegrass, which had a pretty strong pace. And I would imagine they're going to send, not all the way to the front, but they're going to try to get this horse over and clear some ground going down the backstretch here, going 7 furlongs. And I think 20-1, if you can get anywhere near that on the morning line, that would seem like a really good value play. And I've long been a fan of the Ohio bred Houday horse that, like you said, hard knocking, runs his race every time. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch this race. I think just seeing the potential of Knightsbridge is really exciting. He's going to be up on the front end along with Good Look and Justice. Those 2 are kind of your speed horses in this race, but it's going to be interesting to see whether Book'em Danno can track him down. We've seen him do it against better competition. Last time out, he lost to a horse, Domestic Product and Prince of Monaco. No disrespect in losing to those 2 in the A-Challenge Jerkin. So this is a salty field and a really nice one too, especially for a grade 3 this late in the season.
I would just suggest maybe that if you're building a ticket and as I said, if you're going to not single Book'em Danno, I wouldn't just go Book'em Danno and Knightsbridge, because you're not going to get that much value in the horizontals with that horse if he were to upset Book'em Danno. So if you get Book'em Danno upset, I think you want to give yourself some bigger price chances at it too, because after him you could make several cases. I mean, Knightsbridge has only had the 2 starts, so
Yeah.
Huday's a lot more battle tested, for example. So yeah, that's the interesting dilemma you find yourself in. You've got a horse we're going to talk about in the Raven Run later. You could also consider singling that one, so you could go wider here, deeper here, and single that one, or vice versa.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting point about, if you see Book'em Danno and Knightsbridge as your top 2 choices, but you don't want to single Book'em Danno, then you almost have to single Knightsbridge then, because like you said, there's really not a lot of value if
Yeah.
you include both of them. Then you're just doubling the cost of your ticket and not really getting much in terms of return for getting the one over the other. So, I'm with you in terms of trying to find some other prices if you're going to try to get past Book'em Danno, or if you're going to try to include Book'em Danno and a horse, maybe like a Houday or an Epic Ride at a big price. You have your favorite there to fall back on, but then maybe you can catch a price just in a flyer. But you brought up the Raven Run, so let's transition to that race. A grade 2 going 7 furlongs for your 3-year-old fillies, again on the dirt, a 10-horse field. Your morning line favorite is Emery for Brad Cox. This is a horse that, again, always seems to show up and run her race. 4 for 6 winning, including a win in the Victory Ride, and last time out finishing second to a horse that might very well be the favorite in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint, and that's Ways and Means. So certainly has been running against top competition. But there's some other interesting horses in here. My main squeeze is a New York bred who went down to Churchill and won a grade 3 last time out, was winner of the 8 Bells. Muccia as well, I think, ran a really big race last time out at 6-1 in the morning line. So there's some interesting horses here. You had mentioned Emery as a possibility as a single. Is that kind of your thought on the strategy here? Or do you think that maybe a couple of horses might be able to give her a little bit of a test?
There's a price horse that I like a little bit of a price, not a big one, that I'll get to in a second. But as for Emery, she won very impressively here in the spring, and she had a nice winning streak that was stopped in the test by an outstanding horse. So the test and this Raven Run are 2 of my favorite races of the year, going 7 furlongs, and you often get big fields, and it's usually a really quality horse that wins the race. Certainly that was the way with the 1-2 finishers in the test. And with Emery, I couldn't make a good enough case to pick against him when I did my picks. But the horse that I think's got a little chance to outrun the odds, and that may have a decent move forward buyer wise in her, is Vivi's Dream. She was a very highly regarded 2-year-old, and I think if you go back and look, the one time she ran an elongated sprint was a mile race as a 2-year-old, the Pocahontas. She won by 8. She either ran shorter than this, or she ran 2 turns as they were trying to make her into, an Oaks, Alabama, Philly, whatever. And I think I talked to Brian Hernandez, her rider, and he said he thinks she's probably better at those 1-turn races. Maybe, she could get to a mile and a 16th and be good in the right circumstances. But I think 7 furlongs to a mile might be her sweet spot. And that last race is better than it looks. I went back and watched it, and she was down on the inside and kind of trapped in a box with nowhere to run. And she was waiting and couldn't really, get out, and there was no hole. And Brian just had to be patient. In the meantime, there are 2 horses on the outside, to borrow Trevor Denman's phrase, that were in full flight for the wire. And by the time she got out, then she's got to try to run them down. And that was a bad matchup there. But I thought she finished up well. And the horse that she nosed out for 4th, Silver Rose, came back to have a nice win here at this Keeneland meet. I think it was last week. So, and that was, I think, a Brad Cox filly. So I think that race is better than it looks on paper. And if, let's say, she jumped up from an 84 to a 94 on the buyer scale, they give her a shot.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. Ken McPeak's been training her well to this point. And it's interesting that she's second back from a little bit of a layoff now as well, having not run from March until September. McPeak actually just had a winner today, horse Generous Tipper, who was second back from kind of another lengthy layoff and had been training well leading up to that race. So I think that's a very logical alternative, or at least price horse to consider underneath, even if you like Emery up top, using those 2 in an exacta. I'd be remiss, and my contract might be canceled if I don't bring up the New York bred, my main squeeze.
Yeah.
So,
very valid horse.
Yeah, she's an interesting horse in that, she made that transition from New York bred races and really being a clear class of that generation and crop up here in New York. And then tried to do kind of what you said, you're stretching out in terms of VV's Dream, going to that mile on a 16th in the fantasy. That was just not her game at all. Cuts back and then wins the 8 bells in the slop. And follows it up with a distant fourth in the Acorn, Torpedo Anna, just putting everybody away that race. And then comes back and runs, a decent third in the test and runs second in the Charlestown Oaks. And then last time out just ran probably the best race of her career, going 7 furlongs in the dogwood at Churchill Downs. Now, 4-1, you're not getting a huge price. And that 91 buyer speed figure last time out is a career best. So can she back it up or even maybe potentially move a little bit forward? I will say trainer Mike Maker has been a little bit cold in Kentucky over the last month or two between the start of the Keeneland meet and the Kentucky Downs meet. So that's something potentially to keep in mind. But going to be a really fun race. And I will say, Emery is a horse that, there are certain horses that I always try to beat, sometimes. And I think I can try to beat this horse. And Emery was that horse for a while where I just I think I can beat her. I think I can beat her. I think I can beat her. And then finally, 2 back in the victory ride, I said, the heck with it. We're not even going to try to beat her anymore. We're just going to go with it. And she won that day. And like I said, I think that second in the test last time out over a muddy sealed track against Ways and Means did nothing to damage her reputation at all. Very impressive horse, and one that has, I think, an effective running style and versatile running style. She's got good speed. She doesn't need the lead though, and can track the pace a little bit.
I think Emery, I think Vivi's Dream, I think My Main Squeeze are all those kinds of fillies that I referenced that races like the test and this Lexus Raven run, that it's usually a quality filly. I think Vava won it last year here in the Raven run. And I think either one of those 3 would fit that bill. My Main Squeeze, I talked to Louis Saez about her in that last race, which was very impressive. He said the race at Charlestown, the turns were maybe a little tight. And that's a 2-turn race at Charlestown.
Yep.
So I would draw a line through that. And she wasn't going to beat Torpedo Anna, but that was a nice effort. But you look at the 8 bells, the test, and the dogwood, and those longer sprints, and I think she stacks up really well. And if Emery is at all off her game, I could certainly see this horse or VV's Dream winning.
Absolutely. I used to live in Northern Virginia, used to make my way over to Charlestown every once in a while. And I always had to laugh when I believe Art Collector went from winning a 1-turn mile and an 1/8 race to a 3-turn mile and an 1/8 race. There are a lot of turns there at Charlestown in the bull ring. So that is something to keep in mind, though. You're absolutely right about all those 7 furlong races. There are 2 turns. It's just a different dynamic. And some horses take to that. Some horses don't. A lot of times kind of early speed is really a little bit of a cheat code up there. So yeah, going to be a lot of fun to see. And I agree with you that any 3 of those winners would absolutely continue to enhance the quality of the Raven run. And what a great race this has become, and really great list of winners over recent years. So, Tom, thank you so much for joining me on this preview of these 2 really exciting races on Saturday. You're a busy man. Let the folks know where they can find you and what all you have going on, both at Keeneland and just covering Kentucky sports in general.
Yeah, I do play-by-play for Kentucky football and men's basketball, 25 plus years doing that. So that's the main gig. But I do a lot of work for Keeneland. Jim Goodman, the Mutuals guy there, he and I do a podcast every Saturday that's on Keeneland's ADW site, if you're a member, that you could get access to. We look at a late pick 4 somewhere. Jim usually makes the call. And then we do that for every day of the race meet, and we'll do both days of the Breeders' Cups. On big days, we'll do a little more, but generally it's on Saturdays. I do picks for the website, interviews for social media, talk to groups, kind of whatever they need me to help out with. And we'll just love being at Keeneland, especially in the fall. It's really starting to get pretty here with the leaves changing, and the racing's fantastic, and the weather's been fantastic. It was a little cool to start this second full week, but I think it's supposed to warm up by Saturday.
Yeah, same up here, actually. It was very chilly. I live on Rockaway Beach. It was windy and cold this morning. I decided not even to go get my bagels. So, that tells you how cold it is. But yeah, up here in New York, it's going to be the same sort of thing, warming up a little bit later in the week. Should be really nice. And yeah, listen, Keeneland in the fall. Listen, folks, if you haven't been there before, you got to go. I went there 2 years ago for the Breeders' Cup. That was my first time going to Keeneland, and just could not have been more impressed and overwhelmed. And even got to taste the bread pudding and the whole 9 yards. So it's always a lot of fun down there in Lexington. Tom, thank you again so much. Really appreciate it. Make sure to check out all of Tom's coverage at Keeneland and beyond. My name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races, and reminding you, friends, it's now post time.